Hey, what's up everyone? I'm Jakejames Lugo, and welcome to the channel, where you'll find some of the most fair and honest game reviews out here. And because everybody's in a Spider-Man craze right now, we're literally just before No Way Home comes out, I figured why not talk about a classic Spider-Man game that everybody knows, whether you played on SEGA Genesis or Super Nintendo. Of course, I'm talking about Maximum Carnage for the SEGA Genesis. Specifically for me, this was the version I played during my childhood, and I was like, you know what? There's so many other Spider-Man games out there that probably people are going to talk about or I've talked about to death, but nobody has really kind of like dived into this game the way that I want to dive into it. The 90s were a very cool time to be a Spider-Man fan. So much was happening. There were great story arcs from Marvel Comics, the Spider-Man animated series was airing on TV, and in 1994, a game known as Maximum Carnage released for the SEGA Genesis and the Super Nintendo. This was a big deal because Maximum Carnage was a 14-part storyline that had been going on through 1993, and it was super popular. The marketing for this game was very sweet too. The first run of cartridges for both consoles were colored red, and the promo image for the game was Carnage looming over New York City with the tagline, "Paint the town red." The plot for Maximum Carnage was a big crossover event that featured a number of superheroes and villains from across the Marvel Universe. But at its core, it was a team-up between Spider-Man and Venom taking on the villain Carnage. I'm not going to get into the specific details of it all, but really what you need to know is that Carnage was a spawn of the Venom symbiote that is crazy. In the story, Cletus Cassidy escapes from maximum security prison as Carnage and recruits a number of villains to cause all types of havoc in New York City. Spider-Man and Venom need to join forces along with a bunch of other heroes in the area to prevent Carnage from rampaging across the city. If you're a big comics fan, you'll be happy to know that the game is pretty faithful to the original story, right down to using panels for the short cutscenes in between stages. But does being authentic help Maximum Carnage to become a great game on the SEGA Genesis? That's the real question that will definitely get your spider sense tingling. So the only other thing I could say about this is that if you don't really care about comic story arcs or comic characters in general, you're not really going to care too much about the story of this game, even though it's super authentic to the original 14-part comic arc, which is pretty awesome because we seldom see that in a lot of video games based on comic characters. They're almost always doing their own thing. They're never super faithful to the source material. But the other thing that I will say that a lot of people will resonate with, even if you're not really a comics fan, is the music of Maximum Carnage, because man, the music in this game sounds freaking dope. The one thing I will say is that I prefer the SEGA Genesis sounds compared to the Super Nintendo. I know a lot of people love the Super Nintendo sound chip and think that for this game the soundtrack is better over there, but I feel like this music was made for the SEGA Genesis. Just that grungy rock sound. The music is done by the American rock band called Green Jelly, and just the way it comes together very nicely just sounds so much better to me anyway on the SEGA Genesis over the Super Nintendo. It just, again, is that grungy, gritty, harsh sounds that you get from a lot of different games that were on the SEGA Genesis that just sound amazing. They just sound right. They sound almost damn near perfect. Okay, all of that aside, let's talk about gameplay because I have a lot of thoughts about this in relation to this game, and not all of them are all that great. I know a lot of people consider this game to be a classic on the 16-bit consoles, and for some people it's one of the best Spider-Man games ever made. But was it really that good? To be honest with you, oh man, I could hear the Marvel Comics fans coming for me now. This is gonna be rough. Like many other superhero games of the time, Maximum Carnage has you beating up a ton of bad guys as either Spider-Man or Venom. The game is a straightforward brawler that has you going through over 20 stages. The controls are responsive and easy to use. Spider-Man and Venom both have web powers that allow you to grab enemies, swing across the screen, fire webs to hold enemies in place, and lay up the smackdown on everyone in your path. Believe it or not, the game doesn't feel long despite there being a lot of stages to play through. At certain points, you get to choose whether to control Spider-Man or Venom and play a few specific stages that are unique to them. This is pretty cool, but the concept is never taken far. There's only a few stages that you'll miss if you choose to go with one character over the other. If I'm being honest, it never feels like you're missing much in this case. Yeah, Spider-Man might have an exclusive fight against Demogoblin in Times Square, and Venom might have a battle in Central Park, but so what? You don't see any unique cutscenes in either case. Everything plays out the same regardless of who you control in every single stage. Now, despite my praise for this game, there's some big problems that I had with Maximum Carnage. The game is just way too difficult and unbalanced. I've seen so many people over the years mention how this game is challenging, but I'm sorry to say, you're all very wrong. Maximum Carnage is ridiculously unbalanced and borderline tilted in many ways. The biggest issue that I found was the inconsistent damage output from enemies and the insane amount of no-win situations that you could find yourself in. Normal enemies will be okay for a time, but then you get to the later stages where the game throws a ton of baddies at you in ridiculously cheap ways. I'm talking multiple attacks from all directions, invincibility frames on things you can't predict, and damage output that is never consistent from the same enemies. All of it just feels incredibly cheap. And that's just the normal bad guys. The bosses are even worse. The villains like Doppelganger and Demogoblin get frustrating because they have attacks that make them completely invincible, while dealing heavy damage to you and taking away your lives. Most boss fights have you facing 2 to 3 different villains at a time, and you have to deal with everything they throw at you simultaneously. The worst of these fights happens later in the game when you're beaten all to hell by other enemies and you still have to face the bosses down with little to no recovery items. It's like a never-ending gauntlet at the midpoint of the game, where things become very annoying and not fun to play. Notice how I haven't really mentioned Carnage in much of this, and it's for a very good reason. I hardly got to fight him, mostly because I kept losing all my lives and continues before the bigger fights later in the game. When you finally see Carnage in some stages, you're so beat down by the craziness of everything else that you're all but guaranteed to lose. Carnage himself is just as bad as any of the other villains, with multiple attacks that grant him invincibility and heavy damage. Again, it just feels like so many things are just super unbalanced out of your favor. Between the heavy damage you take, how little damage you deal to the enemies, and the lack of power-ups around you, this can be a real drag. Real talk, so much of this could have been tweaked to feel a lot better and more balanced to play through overall. Another factor that comes into the play when you're fighting different baddies or any of the villains is that you can find these icons that enable you to call other superheroes to help you out. They'll just come in and throw a random attack that knocks down everybody on the screen, which is super cool and it does a good amount of damage. But finding these icons, it's so far and few between. I mean, it's cool we get to see like Captain America, Cloak and Dagger, Black Cat, and all these other superheroes help you out. But in some stages, you'll never find these icons whatsoever. And in others, you might get a bunch of them, but then those are the only ones you're going to get for like 2 or 3 stages. And it's super inconsistent, super all over the place. And if you end up wasting them, then you're pretty much, out of luck. And what really sucks about this, and what plays into something else I should mention, is that there are these hidden stages or little hidden rooms that you could find in certain areas that you go to, depending on which stage that you're on. And you have to do these specific things in order to unlock them, or at least get teleported into them. Whether it's like falling from a certain height, like hitting a certain area. But once you get into them, you get all these like little power-ups and like health pickups, and that's cool. But if you didn't know how to reach these things, you'll never find them. There are no hints in the game. There is no like little heads up or little indicators that show you that you can interact with this certain area of the stage in order to get to a hidden room. They are super hidden, and unless you look it up online or look through a guide or something, you're never going to find these things, and you're going to miss out on all these extra power-ups that could be super helpful for you, especially in the later stages when things get super unfair and almost super damn cheap. Like almost frustratingly so. A perfect example of this is, like I mentioned before, the boss fights with some of the villains are annoying, but there's one specific boss fight that I find to be super broken. Like, that's the best way I could describe it. It's super broken, whether you're playing as Spider-Man or Venom. And that's against the giant golem or the giant robot that you find in the Fantastic Four headquarters. You have to get past this robot in order to complete the stage. It's like the very last thing that you need to do. And what's so broken and annoying about it, any little hit from this thing takes out your entire health bar. And it feels like it just wasn't finished being programmed or kind of like tweaked a little bit when they were making this game. because even in some of the footage I'm going to show you now, whether I'm playing as Spider-Man or Venom, every single touch from this thing totally takes out your entire health bar and knocks you down and then sets you up to get hit again, so you're losing so many lives when you're fighting this thing. It just feels so broken and messed up, and it's one of those parts of the game, and at least you've probably seen this in other games too, where it's like a beginner's trap, because if you don't know what to do and what to exploit, you're totally going to lose all your lives and all your continues and get a game over. It's super unfair, it's super cheap. I feel like it needed to be tweaked a little bit more, or at least adjusted, so it could feel like it actually could be stable and fun to play through, because as is, this is like the worst aspect of the entire game. I guarantee you, you will not get past this part and see the rest of the game unless you look up how to fight this thing online. And it involves some pretty stupid things and like exploits as far as like what type of actions you could do, when to actually jump and attack this thing. It's just so annoying. I feel like you shouldn't have to go through like all these hoops and stuff just to get past a simple boss in one of these stages. You know, granted, there's all these other factors like I mentioned with the villains, and I can understand that. Those are the villains of the story. But this random robot, this random giant golem just totally destroys you and you just can't see the rest of the game. Nah, man, I find that to be super frustrating and super stupid, and I guarantee you, if you're someone that cares about like stable games to play through, this will be the point of the entire game of Maximum Carnage that you'll just check out. I'm as big of a Spider-Man fan as anybody else, but if we're going to be honest here, we need to see everything for what it is. So can I recommend that you play through Maximum Carnage on any platform? Honestly, this game is not as great as we all remember, so I would say no. If you're already a big Spider-Man fan, then you probably already have played this game a bunch of times. But if not, and if you didn't grow up with it, you can satisfy your curiosity and really enjoy the music and visuals of Maximum Carnage. But as far as being a solid game to play through, there's way too many issues in here that I feel really dampen the experience and prevent it from doing everything that a Spider-Man game can. And there you go, everyone. Those are my thoughts about Maximum Carnage for the SEGA Genesis. The game is also available on Super Nintendo. Look, I get that so many people grew up playing this game. They look at this with rose-tinted glasses and consider this to be a classic of the 16-bit era. I totally understand that. I came from that generation. But playing it right now, you know, with older eyes and a different mindset, there's just so many things broken about this game. There's so many things that are just messed up. It's like a classic, like, vintage car. On the outside, it looks amazing, but when you look under the hood and actually see, like, how mediocre it is, it's not as great as what it's made out to be. And I'm not saying this game is trash, but I can't really give it my recommendation solely based on the way that how certain aspects about it are just broken or just not balanced and all over the place. To give it credit, though, I will say that at least the time that this game was made was, like, again, the early 90s to the mid-90s. A lot of games that were designed back then were kind of artificially made harder. Like, certain things about them were much more cheaper, a little bit much more difficult and unbalanced, solely for the fact that they wanted to get you to play them longer, as opposed to taking them to the video store, you know, as a rental, or to go out and buy another game. At least that was the time frame that this game came out. And as much as I love the music and just the style and just overall the fact that it's based on a Marvel comic, you know, Spider-Man, everything else I have to come into play when it comes to my recommendation, and I can't really recommend this. But I will give it this, though. That image, the cover art, and the promo image for this game, freaking amazing. This is iconic right here. But as always, with any other game that I review on this channel, that's just my opinion about Maximum Carnage. Let me know your own thoughts about this game down below in the comments section. Tell me, are you a fan of Spider-Man? Do you love Maximum Carnage, whether it's Super Nintendo or SEGA Genesis? Tell me some of your favorite comic games that are based on various comic characters, either Marvel, DC, or any other independent comics. What are some of the best ones out there, outside of the ones that everybody goes to? Because I know everybody brings up like the Arkham series, everybody brings up like the Ultimate Spider-Man games, or just the classic Spider-Man games on PlayStation. Tell me some ones that maybe we all don't know. Put all that stuff down below in the comments section. Hey, thank you everyone for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it enough to check out some of my other videos I'll list here on the side in just a moment. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel to see new content that I post up as it goes out. You can also join my Patreon for early access to new videos and exclusive content you'll only see over there. Don't forget to join my Discord server via the link in the description too. There's a lot of great people who love gaming and make an amazing community in there that I know you'll love being part of. Hope to see you again real soon. Peace out and stay epic, everyone.